Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 122, recording on Wednesday, October 22nd. The guest, his name is Daniel Popper. He covers the Chargers as a colleague of mine at The Athletic. He also has his own little Patreon called Hops with Pop, where it's in-depth Chargers content constantly. He always love seeing him in Indy at the Combine and owners meetings and all that stuff because he puts in the work. He watches film. He's connected inside that building, and has done a really good job covering that team now for multiple seasons. So hope you guys enjoy the conversation. That is mostly a preview of Thursday night's game. Fly out to LA in a little bit. Place that holds a place in my heart. I interned out there for Yahoo Sports after my junior year of college. So always fun to be back in some old haunts and stuff like that. As always, if you're new here and you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review and follow, and we appreciate that. This show, which we do 2 times a week, sometimes 3, sometimes 1, but we average 2. I mean, it's about averages here. It's presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by some great people in Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson. They're Vikings fans. They've got branches all over the area in Minneapolis, and their online banking platform is really good. So really recommend First Resource. Their information is in the description. And then we're also sponsored by Unreal. This is a locally owned clothing brand, that I'm wearing every day. I mean, I've got Vikings people, players. Adam Thielen's coming up to me asking why I'm wearing it so much. He wears it too. TJ Hawkinson made a comment. I mean, this is it's all the rage. And they've got limited edition hoodie drops that are, I mean, it's awesome quality, really good stuff. So their information is in the description as well. But I legitimately I want to endorse brands that I like, and I'm wearing it every day. You'll see if you're on my flight to LA, you'll see me with it. So thanks to Unreal for sponsoring the show. With that, let's not waste any more time. Thursday night football, Vikings-Chargers. Everything you need to know about this game, player health, quarterback, scheme. You got it with Daniel Popper right now. All right, Daniel Popper, a colleague of mine who I respect immensely here at The Athletic. Welcome to the Alec Lewis Show, man. I know it's probably very exciting to be on here. It'd be, benchmark time for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, and the respect is mutual, my friend. Very happy to talk some ball with you.
Thank you. No, I remember preseason you did a story on Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator over there, who is really interesting to me, and we'll get into his defense because it hasn't, I don't know, the tenets that he lives by, you don't see, you haven't seen them a ton of late. I want to start here from afar because this is a Vikings podcast. What is your view of the Vikings from afar as this game is approaching?
Yeah, so, every week I dive in as you dive in, and I kind of take a 2-pronged approach to sort of scouting the opponent. I start with key statistical indicators just to get a sense of overall how do they perform, running game, pass game, explosive plays, red zone, third down, that kind of stuff. Then I take that statistical breakdown and then watch the film and try and put it together and piece it together in some sort of cohesive picture. And I'll tell you what, the Vikings statistical breakdown is a little peculiar, and it was a little bit difficult to figure out exactly what they are. But I think having, watched this defense before, obviously going back to 2023 when the Chargers were in Minneapolis, you kind of have a certain expectation of what you're going to get from a Brian Flores defense. They're going to blitz a bunch, which they're doing. They're going to be really funky. And watching the film from the Eagles game, it was exactly that. I mean, they're playing cover 2 behind a 6-man pressure with 5 guys in coverage and all sorts of really cool stuff. I was geeking out over it last night while I was watching it. Offensively, obviously with Kevin O'Connell, you expect the scheme to be really tight, which I think it did appear so on film. But, you have Carson Wentz at quarterback, and he looks to me to be a little inaccurate and spraying some throws, which is to be expected. So, heading into this one, I think my general feeling is I'm a little bit more worried about the defense than the offense, which is interesting because obviously in past years, this offense has been firing, especially with these weapons. The weapons are really good. But to me, the quarterback play hasn't been good enough for that side of the ball to be really dangerous. I'm more worried about this front, which looks really, really good, and how it matches up with the Chargers offensive line and how a beat-up Chargers offensive line is going to handle all the different stuff that Brian Flores does defensively.
We can just start there. Give me, what is the offensive line situation? I'm watching Bobby Hart at right tackle. I'm like, is this guy the third string, the fifth string? I've got guys whose names I've never even heard in my whole life. So what is the offensive line situation? I know Joe Alt talked to you guys, it seemed like yesterday. There's Jamari Sawyer is in the picture. Like, what does it look like? What do you expect it to look like? Because I can't really figure out who's in, who's hurt, who's not. So I'm curious.
Yeah. It's been a worst case scenario. That's how I would describe it. Like, if you were to draw up the absolute worst case scenario for the Chargers offensive line, it would look like this. So they lost starting left tackle Rashawn Slater in training camp to a torn patellar tendon on an absolute freak play. Joe Alt's been out with a high ankle sprain. Their third tackle, Trey Pipkins, has been out with a knee injury. Their fourth tackle, Jamari Salyer, has been out with a knee injury. So they were starting fifth and sixth string tackles. Austin Deculus at left tackle, Bobby Hart at right tackle. Bobby Hart had made his first start
it
since
sounded like something like a ligament in your knee or something.
like a Latin word. So he's been at left tackle, Austin Deculus, who they traded for at the end of August with the Texans. So that just tells you sort of where he was coming from, a team that was desperate for offensive linemen, traded him away. So he's been at left tackle. Bobby Hart's been at right tackle. Deculus had an ankle injury in the game on Sunday against the Colts. Foster Sorrell went into the game at left tackle. So they were on their sixth and seventh string tackles. Jamari Salyer was up for the game, but was only an emergency option. So the issues start there. Any team that's rolling out a sixth and seventh string tackle, it's going to be a good amount of pressure. I think in the Dolphins game in week 6, they were really able to stay on schedule. The game was close. They were able to run it because the Dolphins have a really bad run defense. They were able to get into the boot action game, screen stuff, quick game, and they didn't have to drop Herbert back that much when they did. They were able to max protect it up. This past week, they got behind early. It was 20-3 in the first half, and they had to throw it to get back in the game, and they could not protect. And, the tackle situation is what it is. They have all three of their starters, in quotes, on the interior. Zion Johnson at left guard, Mekhi Becton at right guard, and Bradley Bozeman at center. It was an area of concern last year. The only change they made was signing Mekhi Becton. Becton has not been good. Bradley Bozeman has regressed to the point where he's probably the worst center in football. And Zion Johnson, former first-round pick, sort of is what he is as a player at this point. Has not become, I think, what they expected him to be when they drafted him. He's reliable. He plays through injury. He's on the field. But his weaknesses are his weaknesses. He's prone to mistakes against good interior rushers in one-on-one situations. He has a very difficult time picking up stunts, identifying stunts on the interior. So they are gettable across the board. However, it does seem like reinforcements could be coming this week. Joe Alt is practicing, and seems like he's going to give it a go. They didn't put him on IR, and this would be game 4 that he missed, so it sort of makes sense that he would return this week. And Trey Pipkins is also back in practice, and he was the starting right tackle after Rashawn went down. Joe Alt moving from the right side to the left side. So it could be a little bit better, but I will say this. The interior, regardless of who's playing tackle, is very gettable, and I see Jonathan Allen playing at a pretty high level, and that's a matchup that I'm keying in on in this game.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Jonathan Allen because, here locally there have been a lot of questions about the interior, and Javon Hargrave has not played well, and his snaps have decreased as a byproduct of that. But I do feel like Jonathan Allen has given them some juice. And then Jalen Redmond is another guy for you to watch. I hear locally he's this UFL Arlington Renegades guy that they plucked a couple years ago, and he has wiggle and he has he can bull rush a little bit on the interior. So those two are very interesting. It was fascinating for me watching the film of that game. You mentioned like the game script, the Colts are way ahead, and it's just like Justin Herbert, Superman cape, like what's possible. And the thing that stood out to me, maybe more than anything, is you think about Justin Herbert rocket arm, velocity. He can see the field. But, like, the athleticism was kind of wowing for me. And so as I look at this game, I want your thoughts on this. For me, it feels like, can you get pressure Justin Herbert, and can you contain the pocket? And if you do those two things, you should be in solid shape. What do you think hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be the key with Herbert. That's how you slow him down. It's hard to contain him, though, as I'm sure you saw on film. Like, his ability, I think the thing that jumps out to me in this specific area is, like, obviously he has the speed, acceleration, short area, quickness, but his strength is really what allows him to escape the pocket regularly. There was a play in that Colts game where he's stiff-arming, an edge rusher to get out to the outside. You can go back to the Broncos game in week 3 where he takes a direct shot from 290-pound Zach Allen and is still able to, escape to the left and find Keenan for a game-winning touchdown. So he's a Dolphins game, takes a hit from 263-pound Jalen Phillips and is able to, find Ladd McConkey. His base was not affected by the hit at all whatsoever. So that's really a key. He's incredibly strong, and I think that probably gets overlooked in terms of his ability to escape the pocket. But, I think a lot of it comes down to game script, right? Like, can the Vikings stop the run? They've been, not very good in that area, I would say. And, interestingly, I looked this up, and I'd love to get your take on it. They're facing the highest opponent-designed rush rate in the league. Teams are running it on over 45% of their offensive snaps against the Vikings defense. So, obviously, teams are realizing it. They face the fewest dropbacks in the league, 184. So they're seeing a lot of running game because I think teams think that's the weakness of the unit. And if they can stop the run and get into, advantageous downs and distances, I feel like this front could eat, even if Pipkins and Alt come back. But that's really, where it starts. If you can stop the run and get the Chargers into 2nd and long and 3rd and long, then you can get an advantage, pressure Herbert, and try and disrupt the passing game in that way.
Yeah, I mean, you bringing up those statistics, it tracks. I mean, definitely. Part of it is, to your point, that is the susceptibility of this defense. Outside of the cornerbacks, which can be plucked at a little bit. I mean, you go back to the 2023 game between these two teams, and Keenan Allen had 18 catches for 215 yards, and Byron Murphy was out there somewhere close in certain zone pockets. But I think so much of that statistic is staying at a 3rd and long. I mean, this defense is designed to, really, if they can get the opposing offense into 3rd and long, they thrive in those situations. That's where they force turnovers, and that is really, like, as they design the plan for this season, being able to get offense in 3rd and long and then force turnovers was such an integral piece to what they wanted to do. And that's the thing about this matchup for me is it's not like the Chargers offensive line on the interior is probably, like, they don't generate a ton of interior push. And then you have running backs in Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins, who aren't dynamic enough probably to create after contact. And so, like, for Vikings fans watching this game, like, the Vikings should be able to stop the run in this game. If they can't, that is an immense red flag to me.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. The Chargers have really had their success running the ball outside the tackles, getting to the edge, especially when Amari and Hampton was playing. But as you alluded to, the vision for this running game was you draft a running back in the 1st round. He's super explosive. He's super physical. And you pair him with a very reliable, doubles hitter in Najee Harris. And you can sort of see it coming together. Both those guys are on injured reserve now. Harris is out for the season with a torn Achilles. Hampton is dealing with this ankle thing, and he's going to be out, for the foreseeable future. So they're on Kamani Vidal, who's a 6th-round pick last year. Haskins isn't going to miss this game this week, so it's probably going to be Nyheim Hines as their second back. But you're exactly right. They just have not been able to run the ball effectively in between the tackles. And, to me, as far as diagnosing that, running between the tackles, especially, through the A-gaps, guard to guard, like, your center has to be able to climb to the 2nd level. Like, that's absolutely crucial. And Bradley Bozeman right now is just very limited in his movement. Now, he's always been a limited player in that area, but it feels like it's grown to a new level this year where he's very rarely climbing off of double teams and getting to the 2nd level when they're asking him to reach, 3 techniques, two eye techniques. He's having a tough time moving his feet well enough to get to those types of blocks. And if you have a center that's limited in terms of movement horizontally and also the ability to climb to the second level, there aren't a lot of schemes that you can run to produce, push on the interior and create the types of runs you're trying to create. You can, gap scheme, you can't climb to the second level. And then, if you're trying to run zone stuff horizontally, he can't move that way either. So that's the issue. The thing is, they do have good tight ends from a blocking standpoint. Will Dissly's a really good blocker. Tucker Fisk is a really good blocker. When they have produced some of these explosive runs, it's been to the edges where they can take advantage of the blocking at tight end. And also Trey Harris, the rookie receiver, has been excellent as a blocker. So that's really their advantage area in the run game. When you're talking about, trying to run between the tackles, to me, they don't have a good enough center to do it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went there, because one of the ways that opposing offenses have attacked the Vikings and Brian Flores is, they 6 offensive linemen, unbalanced looks. Arthur Smith started it in Dublin in the Steelers game. The Browns followed up on that strategy. You saw it a little bit from the Eagles last week. It's funny. I was watching the Chargers tape. I'm seeing Tucker Fisk and Scott Matlock. I'm like, these guys are like, they work for like 2 men in a truck. They look like guys who would move furniture, and I would not be surprised if we see those guys out there in this game. The last on the Chargers offense, the last thing that's just been intriguing for me, or it was watching the film, Oronde Gadsden, this rookie tight end. Where did he come from? What have you thought of what he's done of late? Are you surprised by it?
Yeah. So he was a 5th-round pick out of Syracuse, converted receiver to tight end in college. And it was evident pretty early on, and I'm talking about like OTAs in the spring, that he was going to be able to impact the game as a pass catcher. He had an immediate connection with Justin Herbert, the athleticism, the ability to run down the seam, create separation on overs, contested catch ability, great body control in the air in some of those contested catch situations. It translated into training camp when the pads came on. He was still making a ton of plays. So it felt like, okay, this could be a guy that they could phase in, play on passing downs, give them a little bit of vertical stretch down the seam, which they didn't have last year. But he's become way more of a complete receiver than I was expecting, because it's not just the vertical stuff down the field. They're incorporating him into the quick game. He was crucial in that Dolphins game. He actually had a fumble on his first reception, was able to come back and finish the game with 6 catches. They were getting him into the flat and just getting him the football and allowing him to create after the catch. That's really where I've been surprised, is how excellent he's been after the catch. Obviously, you saw in the Colts game that 53-yard reception where he throws a double move. Yeah, gets the holding call and takes it another 30 yards deep into Colts territory. So that's really been interesting, and his role has been growing. And I think the other facet of it, which I thought was going to prevent him from getting on the field as much as he's getting on the field, like he's playing tight end 1 snaps right now, was the blocking. Obviously, it was a work in progress because he was a converted receiver. They didn't really ask him to do that at Syracuse, and it's such a big part of this Greg Roman offense is tight ends being able to block. And he's given them enough. That's how I would frame it. Like, which is all you need. That's really what I said heading into the season was like, if he can just give them enough, like get in the way of somebody. It doesn't have to look pretty, but like be functional so that when you're on the field, it's not very obvious passing tell that's coming when you enter the ball game. And he's given him enough, like he'll get in the way of people. It doesn't look pretty at times. And there's certainly situations, and you can go to the Colts game where he gets beaten one-on-one situations. I wouldn't say he's like definitely an advantage player as a blocker, but what he gives them as a pass catcher is so electric that you get him on the field and get him reps, and hopefully over the course of the season, the blocking improves. And I'm starting to see some growth in that area. So, for people that were around the team like me that are, watching every practice and stuff like that, like, I don't know if he came out of nowhere necessarily because he was producing in that kind of way in the spring and summer. But some of the extra ways, outside of vertical stretch that he's been able to impact the offense, I think has been a very nice add for the Chargers.
Yeah, it's I'm just blown away. I'm thinking Ladd McConkey on the film, Keenan Allen, obviously, and then he's all over the place. And it's just like, where did this guy come from? And I 5th-round pick from Syracuse. So it's been interesting. All right, let's flip over to the defense. I mean, the Vikings offense, we said it before we started talking. I mean, it's been when you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, down to down from a success rate standpoint, they are around like close to the top half of the NFL. But
they're 11th in overall success rate. Yeah.
And it's turnovers that have just, doomed them. They've taken a ton of sacks. The penalties have come at costly times. Last week, they were 1 for 6 from a touchdown standpoint in the red zone. So it's like, you mentioned the statistical profile. It is hard to parse because down to down with those advanced metrics, it looks like okay enough. And then they're generating explosives. I think they're probably close to top 10 in explosive play rate. So it's interesting. And so now they face off Thursday night against this Chargers defense that seems to be kind of reeling. And I view this like one or two ways. Either the Chargers are going to approach this as a get right spot and prove on national TV that they aren't in disarray, or the Vikings are going to, I guess, ease some of the concerns here with the offense. So defensively, what did you see against the Colts, which offensively are just a wagon right now? I have to say that.
Yeah, they're firing on all cylinders. But I think you're right on it, because that's when I mentioned the statistical breakdown, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, they're 11th in overall success rate and 27th in EPA per play.
Crazy.
It's you do not see differences like that, and so you have to dig into the numbers a little deeper to figure out what exactly is going on. What is allowing them to be successful play to play, but not producing the expected points that you would imagine? And you were right on it. I mean, 23 sacks allowed, 4th most in the league, 11 turnovers, 5th most in the league, and they haven't been very good situationally, I think, which affects those numbers as well. They've been 26th in third down efficiency, 20th in red zone efficiency. So that kind of leads you to the issues for the Vikings offensively. So here's where I'm at with the Chargers defense. I do not at this stage think it is a scheme problem. I was pulling up the Colts tape after watching it live. I was expecting this to be just, a schematic beatdown where, they're getting drawn out of position by the scheme and they just didn't have the system and the game plan to match up with Shane Steichen. That's not what I saw on film. This is a team right now that's playing undisciplined. And I think what's happening, and this is from conversations in the locker room and watching the film myself, is they haven't been playing good defense. Teams have been able to run the ball on them at will, and this is probably the worst stretch of defense that they've played under Jesse Minter. And as a result, I think players are desperate to make plays. And when players are desperate to make plays, you have guys that are not playing disciplined and they're over pursuing. And, it was a tough matchup when you're in that headspace to go up against a team that does as much misdirection with the play action game, the boot game. But when you talk about 100 yards of offense from the Colts game, 48-yard completion to Alec Pierce, where the cover 3 corner to that side, Dante Jackson bites on a curl route, which was not his responsibility, and they run a corner route right behind him into his zone. That's eyes. That's eyes, and that's jumping on a route that you feel like you might be able to pick it off, and you're playing out of position, and as a result, you vacate your zone. 2 29-yard completions to Tyler Warren in the flat. One of them, they're in cover 3. Deion Henley should be the flat defender. You know that they are going to hard play action fake and bootleg and get Warren on these leak routes to the flat and crossers. It was the number one thing that the Colts showed on film. Deion Henley is desperate to make a play in the running game. They do a good job with the misdirection up front. And Tyler Warren's wide open the flat, rumbles down the sideline for 29 yards in the opening drive. All right. Second 29-yard completion to Tyler Warren in the third quarter. They're in man coverage. Hard play action fake. Derwin James is one-on-one with Tyler Warren. He's desperate to make a play. His eyes go to the backfield to try and stop Jonathan Taylor. Bootleg action. Tyler Warren to the flat. No one takes him because Derwin's eyes are in the wrong spot. And so, that's 100 yards of offense, and that really flipped the game, right? And so, from a coverage standpoint, I think, and it's spread out. That's, I think, the important thing to note is, it's not like they're picking on one guy and one guy keeps making the mistake. You're talking about 3 solid players for the Chargers that all made mistakes in different situations that led to 100 yards of offense. And then the running game, they're just not physical enough right now. You talked about the pillars and the separators that Jesse Minter preaches. One of the big ones is block destruction. And
felt like Denzel Perryman, right the linebacker, was all over the place.
Yeah. And so they're getting to me, it's a lack of edge presence. They haven't had Khalil Mack. He only played 12 snaps against the Colts, and before then he hadn't played since week 2. they cannot set a firm edge in the run game. And, their edges are getting washed down the line, blown off the ball. And then on the interior, they're not stout enough. So it really goes back to what you said at the top, which is like, these are fundamentals. These are things that have been preached day after day after day. Like the two of the pillars that you can key in on, right? Communication is one of them and block destruction is the other. And they're doing neither of those things. And they have to get back to their roots and play disciplined football. I feel like the calls are okay. Like, there's only really one call from the Colts game that I was scratching my head over, and that was when they came out in a pass rush package on a 3rd and 3, and they were able to run right up the middle against a light box. Outside of that call, like, the calls are fine. Guys are just not in the right spots, and they got to get back to playing disciplined football and let the plays come to them instead of trying to play out of structure and outside the framework of the defense to make those plays.
One of my biggest curiosities for Thursday night is, can the Vikings run the football effectively enough for the linebackers and Derwin James' eyes to be in the place they were against the Colts, where they are, as dialed into stopping the run as they had to be against Jonathan Taylor. Like that, as I watch the game, I'm kind of like, if you're not focused on Jonathan Taylor and with the way that they run block, I mean, you are going to be out of sorts completely. Now, the Vikings, we'll see about Aaron Jones. His 21-day window was activated, was open on Tuesday. Jordan Mason has been very efficient. Jordan Mason is not the explosive home run hitter, but he generates yards with his vision. And I believe he's averaging a little over 3 yards after contact. He's pretty good. He's been pretty good. Outside of the fumbles, I feel like Jordan Mason's been pretty good. But that, as I watched it, for me, believe the Chargers are 30th in success rate in run defense right now against design runs, and that's for me. That's where this game begins for me. Can the Vikings run the football enough to put those second level defenders in conflict? And I will say this, Tyre Tart, the interior defender, I think he's solid enough for me. The rookie Jamari Caldwell, I'm curious if you think he's going to play. I kind of liked him coming out of Oregon, big guy with some wiggle. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Vikings can move those guys and they can run the football to put those second level defenders in conflict. And then my other question, and I'd be curious because these cornerbacks, it's St. Juste, it's interesting guys if there's a ton of air in coverage, Carson Wentz will take Jordan Addison on a quick out for 7 yards or 8 yards. So, if they can't run the football, does that become the replacement for the run game? And will the Chargers be willing to shrink some of the air in coverage? Those are some of my questions as I watch, as I'm thinking about this game.
Yeah. Yeah, the run game stuff is, I think you're right on it. Poona Ford was such a big part of their run defense last year, and they let him walk in free agency, and he went to the Rams, and I think they're feeling that loss right now. Tyre Tart is very disruptive when he wants to be disruptive. That's how I would frame it. When there are sudden change situations where he is upfield on first down after an interception, and he's making a TFL, he's forcing a fumble, but he's not as consistent as Poona Ford down to down in terms of taking on double teams. Jamari Caldwell, same thing. You see flashes, but there's not a consistency in terms of setting the line of scrimmage, winning at the line of scrimmage. And I think they're gettable in that area. And then, like you're saying, if they can establish the run, then Kevin O'Connell can get into the stuff that he wants to get in, which is, the outside zone bootleg stuff. There's a great play in the game where they sort of ran an outside zone, but it was an early throw on the slant route. And they didn't even get to the play action fake. You get the outside zone action up front, but instead of faking the handoff, you're throwing it immediately to get ahead of those linebackers keying in on pass, which I thought was really brilliant. So if you can get the run game going, you can get into that stuff. Where I think the Chargers could have an advantage, though, is they will throw sim pressures, blitzes, and they'll play a lot of trap coverages, which was exactly what happened on the Wentz interception. They played cover one and dropped the rat in the hole, the edge rusher, he just never saw him. And the Chargers will do a lot of that stuff. Obviously, you have to get into the downs and distances to do it, but they'll bring the slot corner and then rotate the outside corner down. So, quarterbacks are taught to throw into the blitz. These coverages are designed to intercept those passes when a quarterback throws into the blitz, and that feels like a weakness for Carson Wentz. So if they can get into the downs and distances where they can get into some of this creative stuff, I feel like they can, have Carson Wentz's head spinning a little bit. But it all starts with, you got to be able to stop the run.
And part of me wonders if the Chargers ratchet up the blitzes on early downs to force, if the Vikings enter the game with this idea of we're going to run the football, we're going to be efficient, we're going to keep Carson Wentz out of those downs and distances where it could be trouble, and the Chargers believe that's going to be the strategy, and they blitz more in early downs to stop the run. I mean, that would be an interesting facet of the game. Now, you know this. I mean, Kevin O'Connell and this staff they're good enough to adjust if that is the approach. But the coaching matchup in this one is pretty interesting. I mean, the only other aspect that I mentioned with this side of the ball is Brian O'Neill, who returned Sunday from a sprained MCL, has not practiced this week. How much of that is giving him rest to be ready for Thursday, we'll find out. But Tula Pelote gave it to him a couple years ago, and if he's not in, then you'd be with backup Justin School, who is very gettable, and we saw that earlier in this season. So that would be one aspect from a what the Vikings want to do in terms of airing it out that would probably affect them in trying to do that. Just something that I'm monitoring, I'm watching. Is there anything else with this game that you're curious about or interested in?
No, I think we got to it all. But obviously, Tui Pelotu can get activated once Khalil Mack is back in the mix, and they phased Mack in last week on some passing downs. But speaking with Khalil Mack this week, I think that he is very determined to play more than 12 snaps in this football game. I think he realizes the importance of this moment in the season and the big difference between 5-3 and 4-4 and what 4 losses in 5 games could do to this team. And, this is when your leaders step up. And, Khalil Mack saying this week, I'm looking for action-based things. I'm done talking. I'm looking for action-based things. So, when Khalil Mack is back in there, they've traded for Odafe Owe, and then they can get Tuli on the inside, which is, where he is really, really good when he can get one-on-one with guards. And I like Will Fries a lot. I think Donovan Jackson's playing well, but Tuli can really be, physically imposing on some of those interior rushes, when they're able to get their edge rushing group, like all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time.
There was a snap at least one in that game where he did Tuli got the right guard pretty quickly. The Colts right guard.
Yeah, Gonsalves,
yeah. And so,
the
Vikings center is a question mark, whether it's Blake Brandel or Michael Juergens. I mean, both those guys are definitely gettable. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there. The weather is better than it is here, and it'll be fun to get out there. Thank you, thanks Dana for hopping on. I said it at the top, but I know you put in the work. It's part of what makes these conversations, or why I wanted to do it. So thanks for hopping on, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me. Look forward to seeing you out here.
And that'll do it for episode 122 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate you guys being here. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, it's free to hit that subscribe button, and we appreciate that. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or Podbean or wherever the heck you get your podcast, appreciate that as well. If you rate, review, and follow and all that good stuff. We are presented by First Resource Bank. We are sponsored by Unreal. Thank you guys for being here. Got stories galore at The Athletic. Wrote Monday. Wrote about Dallas Turner. Story about the trade deadline and kind of where things stand in that regard. And then we'll have much more to come from the game from LA, where I will be traveling here shortly. Again, thank you guys for being here. Any other questions you got, toss them in the comments, toss them at me on social media at Alec_Lewis. You can follow the Alec Lewis Show, Instagram at Alec Lewis Show. That's the pub that we need. If you're looking for more Daniel Popper, you can find him on The Athletic or his own Patreon, Hops with Pop. With that, enjoy Thursday night's game as much as you can, and we will talk to you very, very soon.